So the first of these three problems is the problem of evil, right? Or alternatively modernized as like the problem of suffering, right? So this comes in sort of two different forms depending on whether you focus on the nature, on evil itself, the existence of evil itself, or if you focus on the existence of suffering, right? Uh, so the way this argument goes is that God is all good, all knowing, and all powerful. Yet evil exists, right? So how can God, being perfectly good, and perfectly powerful, let evil exist, right? So the classical reply that's kind of stood as the standard for hundreds and hundreds of years, going on, 1,500 by the time uh, we get a different one or a more substantial reply to the problem of evil. It comes from St. Aquinas, who argued that God created all things, and all things that are a part of creation are good, right? Therefore, evil doesn't exist in things that God created. Right? So being equals good, and non-being equals evil or bad. And what happens is that evil creeps in where good is not present, basically by the privation of existence or its corruption. Evil is a corruption of the nature of being. Um, so, as an example, take eyesight. Uh, God created the eye with a particular purpose in mind, that it see. And as long as the eye sees, it's fulfilling its purpose, right? It's fulfilling its teleological design. So the teleological design is a part of Augustine's own argument. So what then of blindness? Well, blindness comes from like cataracts and uh, damage to the eye, essentially, right? Or to the optic nerve, or to the occipital lobe, either way. But this was, other than the occipital lobe, and maybe the optic nerve as like what it was, this was something that was known even in Augustine's time. And cataracts are quite literally like crystals that form and damage the eye, right? So so blindness and cataracts are the most common form of a cause of blindness. Um, so going blind as a result of cataracts, uh, you know, would was seen by Augustine as the creeping in of evil. It's literally a destruction of the eye. In fact, this is the example he uses when talking about privation being the corruption of being. Or of things that exist, right? And the corruption of them from their purpose. So blindness is an evil or a bad or an illness of like the soul or of existence as a whole, and so too it is for all things. Right? Deafness is a perversion of the function, privation of the design of the ear away from its purpose, and so on and so forth. Right? And evil is the corruption or privation of the soul, the dirtying of the soul in this way, according to Augustine. And this was the argument against, you know, the problem of evil that stood for about 1,500 years, closer to about 1,400. But that being said, um, it's with Immanuel Kant, once again, really, that we get sort of the revision of the problem of evil into the more modernized problem of suffering, right? And this sort of changes the name of the game a little bit. Not much, but a little bit, and enough to be significant, which is the important part. The problem of suffering is functionally the same with some minor differences. Right? Uh, it says in the same style, if God is all good, um, or it goes to a more general hypothetical, sorry. If an all good or perfectly good being existed, it would end suffering if it knew about it and was able to end it. Right? God is perfectly good, all knowing, and all powerful. Therefore, and that's what the three little dots together mean. It's basically a way of saying thus, right? Or therefore. God knows about all suffering and is able to end it. So, if God exists, then God would end suffering. But suffering still exists. Therefore, God does not exist. Right? Uh, Now, if you're a theist who happens to believe in God, your ready-made reply is kind of a standard one that we get from uh, a lot of different, you know, sects, but the most famous version of it comes from Kierkegaard, right? Soren Kierkegaard, who said that this is the best of all worlds, right? That suffering is a necessary feature for not just God, not just for us as humans, but for God's greater plan. It's an appeal to what's known as an eschatological scheme. And an eschatological scheme merely says that God has a plan, and that plan is good, right? It's the best possible plan, right? So if God allows evil or suffering, there must be a good reason. And that good reason is free will, so that we can, choose to come to God, that we can all be saved, um, or something similar, right? The exact justification of what that reason in particular is, the core reason of it, changes depending on which philosopher or theist you ask. But that's the general idea. If you find this answer unsatisfactory, well, you can still be a theist and find that unsatisfactory. But generally speaking, the problem of evil or the problem of suffering is the most common argument that atheists, or non-theists, I should say, have against the idea of a personal God. All right.